What up, everybody? Welcome back to On the Break. It's J Mac, Josh BG. Kyle Beats is somewhere that we don't know where he is. Josh, what's going on, my man? Long time no talk.
What's up, dude? It's good to be back. I had to give Kyle crap because he had problems with his computer charger, so he couldn't join us. And at first, I was like, "Are you kidding me? This guy can't get his computer charger fixed." And I thought back, and I was like, "Wait, I think I made this excuse before at one point too, because I left my computer charger at like work or something like that, and had to drive up 45 minutes to go and get it." So I was like, I'll give it to you, Kyle."
I'm relatively positive that is absolutely true that happened at one point. So
I mean, it did. I remember it. Yeah.
And he, so I love that he was like, well, I'm going to try to run up there on my break today to the Apple store and just pick one up. But somehow he ended up making an appointment. I don't really think you need an appointment to buy a charger for a computer unless there's something more fundamentally wrong with said computer. Then that might be a different story.
Or
so
it's like COVID thing.
True. That's a good point. But I was going to say we may need more information.
Like, I trust him 100%, but I just think that it's hilarious that his dog tore up his charger and now he can't get on the computer, you know?
Oh, I trust him 100%, but when it comes to technology, we know how he is with this stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He got sold on stuff. He's going to come back with a real different computer or something.
Absolute rig of a computer that he doesn't Well, yeah, man, it's been a weird time to be off of doing this show, and it physically pained me to not be doing this show over the last month, even though we all have pretty good excuses. I'm not going to go into it a whole bunch, but my wife and I had our first child a couple weeks ago, and you guys have had stuff going on, and you had some back stuff going on, and
dude, I had back surgery. Yeah,
exactly.
And you had a baby, and I had back surgery. Kyle's computers doesn't have a charger.
Yeah, I mean,
huge things.
All huge things, and it was a really weird time, and it's a remorseful time for us to be gone, I think, because there's so much that I feel like we ended up kind of staying quiet on very unintentionally, and that was definitely not the goal of that by any means. And so the timing is really rotten. So you kind of brought it up pre-show. I think we're just going to catch up today about a lot of the shit that's going on in the world and some of the injustice that's going on too, and talk about COVID, talk about the NBA season and getting started, because it's actually, I guess, happening. We'll get into that in a bit, but there's a lot going on, dude.
Yeah, for sure. And we're not gonna. We've never been a show that skims over the controversial stuff, right? We were talking about China as soon as it happened, and about Hong Kong as soon as it happened. We talk about all the controversial stuff, and we weren't trying to do that with our hiatus. It just happened at a horrible time for all of us.
Yeah. The kid just showed up on me. Your back just went out on you. It just...
Right. So we're gonna have a more in-depth episode coming up, and we're working on bringing guests and things like that for everything that's going on within the all the racial tension that's going on. But for right now, it's just kind of a catch up, like you talked about, and we'll make some quick hitters on everything that is going on. Really, the NBA is talking about coming back, dude. I don't know if it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't envision it happening for whatever reason.
I'm pretty skeptical.
Actually, I know what whatever reason is. It's the fact that we're in the middle of 100-year pandemic.
Right.
I feel like everybody's excited. And so I got into it with some people about this on Twitter this morning, and we were talking about baseball, but it's the same concept. I want baseball, I want basketball back. I want everything back to quote unquote normal. We're living in a new normal going forward here, and we have to accept that. But I want all those things back too, but I also don't want it back at the expense of people's health. And we're talking about something that's incredibly contagious right now, and I just the what little we know about it is what scares me the most. And so I just, with all that stuff, I honestly don't see an NBA season happening. I'm glad to hear that you. Well, I guess I'm not glad to hear, but it's interesting that you're on the same page as that.
Yeah, dude. So here's the list that I'm looking at: Jokic, Buddy Hield, and Malcolm Brogdon. Dude, those are all big. That's not little players. They've all tested positive, and they may be asymptomatic, but that doesn't mean that they can play. If you test positive, you can't play, because otherwise you'll infect people. You can't play for 2 weeks. What's going to happen whenever they all go and get in the same room and all are? And it's not like they're closing off everybody from everything. You're still all together in Orlando. In these resorts,
We were
what's
talking
going to happen when you have 4 or 5 people on one team go positive, and then you're like 4 out of your 8 rotation is gone.
Yeah. I mean, that's very possible. And, we talked about it in our group chat this morning. Like, I do not understand why they are choosing Disney World to do this and not somewhere out in the middle of nowhere that's not a hotbed for disease spread right now. I realize that we're kind of like that in a lot of spots around the U.S. specifically right now, but like Florida is one of the worst places you could have. And I mean, we live in Texas, so we can say that because Texas would be equally as bad. Arizona would be equally as bad. I mean, there's just the actual having it in Florida seems insane to me.
Right. And Disney World just came out and said that they were pushing back their opening date to July 17th.
So what are we doing here?
Dude, I don't know what's going on. I don't get it. I don't think it's going to happen.
I saw that they were saying I'm pulling this exact thing up because I was looking at this right before we logged on. They're saying that So Kevin Smith is an NBA writer, put this out this morning of kind of how they're going to handle it. So the Orlando Magic CEO, Alex Martins, told the Orange County, Florida officials that the NBA games will be played all day long at 3 different facilities at ESPN Worldwide of Sports Complex at Walt Disney. Also, there will be stringent sanitation a stringent sanitation process between games. The assumption most around the NBA have is that each game will host each facility will host 2 to 3 games per day. First game will probably start early afternoon, then a break for a 2+ hour cleaning, then the next game. Staggered schedule between the 3 facilities for TV windows. So, I mean, at the minimum, they're thinking out how it's going to work and what's, because we talked about this at the very beginning of this whole thing. Like, you've got to operate that you are under the premise that you are coming back at some point. So it sounds to me like they're at least trying to figure out how this could work. I just don't see how that realistically happens.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that you have to push forward as it's going to happen. But dude, like, they're going to test people game time decisions for every single person in the entire league. That's what it comes down to. Game time decisions for every single person in the entire league. You can't tell me that there won't be a game 7 between the Lakers and the Clippers and Kawhi gets tested positive or LeBron gets tested positive and they sweep that under the rug. You can't tell me that that's not going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this sets some scenario like that up almost perfectly. It really does. And I just, with that all being said, I just don't see how you do this safely given the nature of the sport. And you introduce just a little bit of this kind of fear into guys' heads that are going out there trying to play in a very tough competitive environment to begin with. And you kind of set up a disaster for a situation for chaos.
Avery Bradley just said that he wasn't going to come. And that's understandable. His kid has respiratory issues.
Right.
So he can't take those. He can't take those chances. And dude, he's like a 7th or 8th guy for the Lakers. Like, he's a big time rotation player that comes in and plays lockdown D and knocks down a 3. Like, he's a big time player. This isn't some 12th person off the bench guy. This is a rotation player. That's honestly, they were my favorite to win before this, and now I think I have the Bucks.
Yeah. It helps the Bucks in that way, but I mean, according to Kyle, Avery Bradley is not a difference maker at all. And I
think he is. I
agree with you, and I also think that those kinds of players add up. It's not just about LeBron, and it's not just about AD. It's not about that stuff. It's about the guys around them too that participate. And they haven't played in 3 months. And this is not just the Lakers now, but teams haven't played in 3 months, and so there's not a whole lot of team chemistry to begin with. And then you start plucking guys out.
Dude, yes. Yeah.
And it's
speaking of which,
go ahead.
Speaking of not playing for 3 months, I got my first hot take here. I think that the team that wins the biggest of not playing in 3 months are the Rockets.
Say more.
So all the other offenses are predicated on moving and having joined up movement, right? And having this screen set at this time and this roll happen at this time and this cut happen at this time. The Rockets aren't. They have 4 people to stand there and James Harden goes to work. And I think that's really gonna help them in that they don't have to move around on offense. I think that it also helps the Bucks because they have the easiest defensive scheme to run. Other teams have to do a lot of switches and helping the helper and rotating multiple times. The Bucks just pack everything into the paint constantly and give up the 3-point line. So I think it helps more than anybody else. I think it takes, for me, the Rockets, who were a fringe competitor for me previously, and puts them into a serious competitor. I have my top 3 in the West are Lakers, Clippers, Rockets.
Interesting. I'll do you one better too, to add to your theory here. You could also make the case that the Rockets play no defense, in which case they're not getting close to guys, in which case they're not going to get as sick as maybe the team will, so on and so forth.
That's fair. And I
all that D'Antoni needed was a 100-year pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go ahead and say that with Morey being the thing with China, I think that ultimately the Rockets released the coronavirus. I think that's what happened. I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it's just retaliation is all that is.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so I'm on the Rockets don't play defense, so it helps them weirdly. But I'm also on the Bucks play the best defense in the league and play this really simplified defense where they just jam everybody in paint, so that helps them as well. I think anything that's really nuanced is going to end up being hurt in the playoffs this year. Anything that's really so, like the Nuggets, like I don't see them doing well. Even though previously they were a fringe competitor for me, I don't even know if I have them in that range. If they are in that range, they're at the very bottom of that range now because everything they do is so nuanced and the movement is so quick. And also it relies on passing bigs. And all their bigs are really great passers. Like Mason Plumlee, we're out of practice too. I'm forgetting his name. Paul Millsap and Nikola Jokic are all great passers, but I trust a guard to be able to keep that high level of passing better than I do a big.
Yeah, and that's fair. So my thing about like trying to really figure out how this benefits anybody and whatnot is the fact where I struggle is the fact that I haven't seen anybody play in 3 months.
Right.
And so it's like all that holds true, assuming they're able to just pick back up and do what they did. But I don't think they will. That's why. Right. That's what I'm saying though. Like Rockets or whatever, like all that assumes that they are able to continue to execute on the level that they were executing at before all this happened. And I mean, you've seen the pictures of James Harden that came out lately. Those pictures are terrifying.
Yeah, dude. That's my other thing is he going to cut? Because the Rockets they came out with a statement and said we're going to run less ISO ball. It's like, what are you going to run then? If you're not running ISO ball, that's all you've ever run. Are you putting in plays? I don't know what they're doing there. So I'm much more of a fan of them just running ISO ball with Harden and letting that happen. But I don't know.
Is there a more Rockets thing than to put out a statement saying, "Hey, we're going to run more ISO ball"?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, they said less. They said less ISO ball
or less. Excuse me. That's the most Rocket sounding fucking thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe it's just less with James Harden and more with Austin Rivers. I don't know.
I think it really benefits the teams that didn't necessarily have the biggest shot. Like we talked about the Celtics, we talked about Philly, we talked about trying to think we talked about some of the teams in the West that even are a little further down that could potentially have a window here if things just happen to break the right way. And I think that's what almost upsets me in a lot of ways is that we're probably assuming we come out of this season with a champion. The odds of it's not that it'll be tainted or anything like that. I'm not even saying that, but it's really hard to match that up against all the others. You know what I mean?
I think it'll be pretty tainted depending upon if it's just business as normal and nothing really happens with COVID, then I don't think it'll be tainted. But I can't imagine us not running into a Lakers Bucks finals and either Giannis or LeBron goes down, and then either Giannis's first championship is tainted or LeBron's last championship is tainted or whatever. You know,
right. And then I
can't imagine that not happening.
I'm with you, and then you have to think that you also run the possibility of someone like LeBron's a great example. Giannis is a great example. Big star players in this league, right? Those guys are going to be going out and playing every single night versus some of your role players that may not be. So they're going to put themselves at risk even more so than others.
Right.
As you keep going down the road, I mean, are we going to get to a situation where we're watching some bullshit ass finals that is not nearly reflective of what we should be seeing in the finals? That's a very real possibility of that.
Right. And I think that this whole thing also really helps the Magic a lot because they're so heavily defense and grit and grind team. Like that's just go out there and hold people to 70, and that's all they have to do because they don't really have any type of offensive nuance. Their offense is get the ball in big guy. Jeez, dude, we're Vucevic. I almost said Jokic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're knocking the rust off too, but I think it helps them a lot. I think that it gives them a better chance just because they're so defense oriented. Look at what they beat the Raptors last year, just straight on defense in game 1. And I specifically was saying they could surprise some people. And then the Raptors rattled off 4 in a row on them.
Yeah.
But they're the same team as they were last year. Just put the clamps on somebody and nobody's going to be very polished this time of year round. You could see a 7 or an 8 seed win in the first round, I think.
You definitely could, but I think teams like the Mavericks probably have a better shot at something like that are probably more on the come up. I don't think there's any possible way that. I mean, Orlando was 5 games under 500, right? Like before we stopped everything. So, like, I think there are higher possibilities for teams that have a higher window like that, or a bright future more than anything else. I don't know what the hell's going on in Orlando.
Dude, you're going to hate me for this, but my 2 losers of this entire thing were the Celtics and the Mavericks.
Really? Say more.
Because they have young stars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just don't think that a young guy, like I have a lot more faith in a LeBron coming out and doing what he needs to do, or a Kawhi, than I do a Jason Tatum or a Luka.
Oh, for sure. But and it's proven success track record, right? Like that's a given. But I'll say this. I think for both of those teams, though, I think that Dallas more so than the Celtics, but I would say that they've probably accomplished what they set out to accomplish this year.
Oh, definitely.
Get better, learn how to gel together, figure out what pieces you still need, develop your young guys and the superstars.
Yeah, the Mavericks, this isn't a loss for them.
No. The Celtics a little bit more so maybe, but I don't think the expectation was super high after losing Al Horford and, some of those things that happened in the offseason going into this year.
I thought it was. I thought they still had pretty high expectations. I thought they were supposed to be a 3 seed.
I mean, they are a 3 seed, but I mean, I don't think that anybody thought that they could beat Milwaukee in any way, shape, or form, or the Sixers really. I mean, the Sixers ended up being somewhat inept in a lot of ways, so like that kind of worked to the Celtics' advantage, but I personally never saw them winning a championship, not even really probably sniffing one.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of figured it'd be pretty similar to last year. Obviously, I have high hopes and everything, but I mean, the Kemba thing, I don't know. Gordon Hayward, that whole, you know what? I would rather just get out of that Gordon Hayward contract after this year and move on,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I'm also high on the Sixers. I'm high on them.
That's
I think it makes them better.
That is not talking to anybody that listens to this show.
Yeah, just because they're so defensively minded and they're just so big. Like defense is going to be at a premium. This is going to be the defense playoffs.
You think so?
I would not be shocked if we had a couple of series averaging the 90 points versus the hundreds.
Well, it's also easy to say that when the last like 5 to 10 final series have been just shoot the lights out of the gym for both teams. That's kind of been the MO. Not a whole lot of, not nearly as much defense as,
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you mean like saying that this year is going to be the defensive year compared to like the 5 to 6 years? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, you've had Golden State. That's what they do. They just score buckets,
Right. And the teams that were around LeBron were just shooting threes like crazy too. But what I mean is, I think that we're going to have a couple of series averaging the 90 points.
Averaging the 90 points.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
90-point range, like 90s to 100 range.
Talking
like those. I think actually the Lakers Celtics series were almost in the 80s ranges. But I think we're going to have series like that.
You mean back in the day, right?
No, I mean like the Kobe and Garnett stuff was like in the 80-point range.
Got it. Yeah. That I would have to look back, but I believe it's in that range of, because you had a whole that was Doc Rivers' thing, was the defensive minded,
the whole. I mean, everybody was like that back then. It was all about how well you clamp down on defense, and we were still in the rules and the era and the play style of the big man, but there wasn't a good enough big man out there to go out there and average 30 points like there was with Shaq,
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like everybody played from the post, but nobody really had the skill to play from the post. Like even like if you look back at old Kobe and even younger Kobe, the vast majority of his points scored were from the post, just because that was the way to score. Like nobody was going out there and shooting threes like crazy.
Sure.
But I think we're not going to see that type of play style. But I think that we'll see scores put up like that. I think that the percentages shot from the floor are going to significantly drop, and better defenses are going to take more advantage of that.
Interesting. Once again, that predicates on this actually happening.
Oh yeah, for sure. Which I don't think it will happen.
Yeah.
But I think that we'll get closer and closer, and more people are gonna come out positive, and it's just gonna.
And one of the things that scares me about it too, we'll kind of go back to the actual like disease part of it and all that, and the likelihood of it happening too, is like I saw today, right before we came on the air, that the Red Sox president was like, "Oh well, we could potentially have fans in the stands by the fall," and it's like. No, dude.
Yeah.
No.
This is the Red Sox president?
Yeah. And it's just like, no. Like, we probably shouldn't be doing this to begin with. We definitely don't need to put fans in stands.
What's the overall consensus around baseball? Because the NFL is pretty much like this. Yeah, we'll have full season.
Well, baseball, it sucks because the timing for this really stunk for baseball because they're about to renegotiate their CBA next season.
Ooh,
and so it came up right before that happens. And there's, they got into the situation where owners realized they were going to take a massive hit. So they agreed to like prorated salaries. And then, for basically the game, adjusting the amount of games that are going to play. And they left some language in there that was something to the effect of like, well, if there are no fans in the stands, it leaves room for like negotiation further with the owners. It was very loose language, but it did legally leave room for interpretation. And so, owners obviously don't want to take what they're calling a $4 billion hit for fans not being in the stands, which I can understand that. But like at the end of the day, like these franchises, no matter what sport it is, are investments. And as you know, investments don't always go up in value.
Right.
And one thing that I'm really proud to see the NBA do is, there was not a whole lot of talk of, we're not paying people. There's not a whole lot of talk of owners really kind of bit the bullet for the most part. Not all of them did, but for the most part, they bit the bullet and said, you know what, like this is just one of those overhead costs that the situation dictates, and we got to keep paying people. And Major League Baseball did not handle it very well in that way. And so, I mean, it seems like, they only came to an agreement 2 or 3 days ago. So they're still really, really early into what the precautions and all that stuff is going to be. We don't know any of that yet. They're going to give it a whirl, though. And they've been playing baseball in Korea and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is that they've got their testing and everything under control. And I just, like you were mentioning earlier with the NBA, like you're going to have guys that are coming straight off the court. We're going to be testing and all that stuff right away. And it's like, is this really the best use of these resources to be using these on NBA players one after another after another? I mean, it is to keep them safe, but like there's 120,000 people that have died of this. And I mean, we're looking at like probably close to 200,000 by the end of the year.
Yeah, and that was Silver's concern up front was, and dude, we praised Silver on this show for this, was that he said, I don't want to use all of the resources that America has in order to keep my league going.
Sure.
Right. At one point, the Jazz and the Thunder combined had used 40% of Oklahoma's capacity for testing. It was something crazy. And that was when Gobert tested positive.
Yeah. I didn't hear that.
But yeah, dude, it was insane. And I'm going to be honest, the back medicine drugs are kicking in right now, so I might be pulling that number out of my ass. I don't know what's happening right now. But
at the time, like
ultimately,
but at the time there weren't a whole lot of tests.
No, it was definitely a significant amount of Oklahoma's testing capacity was used on the the Thunder and the Jazz at that given time, to the point of it was irresponsible to use it on 10 people whenever we had 100 tests out there. But now America is doing a much better job at just overall testing, and our testing capacity is much higher. I'm not as worried about the NBA using a significant amount of America's testing capacity. I don't think that that's the case anymore, even if they're testing people multiple times a day. I think that we're fine there.
Yeah, I don't know, like it's hard to say on that. I'm not really sure, but I mean, I know that like we're and there's a lot that goes into that too, right? And there's the whole the people that find the need to politicize a scientific issue, and there's all that shit that's going on too. And it's like, I understand all that and everything, but like, there are just much bigger things at hand right now. And like, I say that as like someone who's watched sports just about every day of my life. And, that I literally have, a company that like is built around talking about sports. Like, I love sports, but at the end of the day, you have to understand what the bigger picture is here, and it's people's safety.
Yeah, I agree. And ultimately, I don't know what I would do if I was Silver right now, because Silver has far and away been the best commissioner in sports since he hit the office. Stern was okay. He was middle of the road. But Silver's been fantastic, and he's always been all about the players' safety. And I think that at this time, he's doing the right thing in that you have to press forward and you have to do this.
You have to try.
Just in case. Yeah, exactly. Just in case something happens. If it doesn't work out, then you can say that you gave it your all and that you tried. True. But what's going to happen, what we need Silver not to do is get so far down the road that he doesn't start seeing the signs that something shouldn't happen. He goes, no, we've done all this work. We're going to keep on going, which I don't think that Silver's about that. Silver's always been really quick to pivot whenever he should. But that's my concern here with going towards it. I hope that he can take a step back whenever we're at August the 14th and the 8 seeds are about to play in, and we have like 4 or 5 people test positive. I hope that he can take a step back and reevaluate and say, should we actually have this season?
Right. And like, you look at things like, I mean, we're starting to move towards mandatory orders for masks and things like that right now, especially particularly in Florida. And it's like, however you feel about that, like, regardless, however you feel about that, it's one of those things where, like, I don't understand how you can say everybody in the state of Florida needs to be wearing a mask, but these NBA players who are all playing right around each other, they're okay to play without them. I don't understand how that logic doesn't add up to me.
Dude, what doesn't add up to me is we were having this exact same conversation 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Like, I feel like I'm in the fucking Twilight Zone, dude. Why are we talking about Florida giving the issue to do masks again?
Yeah.
What the heck? Like,
yeah, I'm with you. It's crazy.
It blows my mind, dude, that people are acting like this thing doesn't exist.
It's real. It's one of those things. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, remember whenever you were a kid and like there'd be these things that would happen, whatever it is. Like, you'd be in a class. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to fail this class. But somehow you managed to pass, and you just don't really know how it happened. It just sort of happened, and okay, fine, whatever. You move on. It happens all the time, and you don't really think about how it got done, but somebody came by and cleaned it up. I think everybody just thinks that the next guy is going to clean this mess up.
Yeah, and that's the way that flipping society has become nowadays. I'm going to get on my soapbox, but it's like if there were 10 of us together and we all 10 went outside and 4 of us were stabbed to death, and then we went back inside and waited inside for 30 minutes and then said, oh, nobody got stabbed in 30 minutes. Let's send some more people back outside.
That's insane.
This whole thing is like.
It's circular, and it's like, man, I get it. I don't like it. Like, I just had to have a fucking, my wife I had to be there with my wife while she had a child in the middle of a pandemic that was not a comfortable situation to be in.
I bet.
Like, yeah, you having back surgery, same kind of thing. Like, it's just not a good time to be putting your hand up and saying, I want to run into a hospital. It's not comfortable.
Did either of you guys have to get the test?
My wife did.
How'd she feel?
So she was negative on it, but I had to. So they were doing, whenever you walked into the hospital, they did like the screening stuff where they take a temperature and asked if you had any of the symptoms and kind of stuff like that. They did that every day.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're doing the best they can, and everybody's doing the best they can as much as possible. And I do think that it seems to me like, based on a lot of the chatter and stuff I see online and whatnot, that people have come around to take it a little bit more seriously. But this is what you were talking about, like, really early on. Like, we need to take this seriously, so we're not taking it seriously for the next 5 years.
Right, exactly. And ultimately, like, that's what we haven't done. We haven't taken it seriously. We took it seriously for the 2 months, and then it's exactly what I said. Nobody got stabbed in 30 minutes, so we said, it must be clear.
Yeah.
Send your boys back out, But the reason why I asked about the virus test, so what happened with me, for the listeners, I worked out March the 28th, and I had this really weird pain in my leg that felt like it was just sore, but it felt like it had been sore for It felt like I hadn't worked out for 5 years, and then I came back and worked out, and it was like that type of soreness. Like it was bad soreness.
Yeah.
And then it kept going, and about 3 weeks later, I started realizing I've been dealing with this soreness for a long time. So I went to the doctor, and they said, yeah, this looks like a mild sciatic nerve problems. And there was another episode where I like worked out again, and foam rolled my back, and it just got really bad. It's so bad that I called the ambulance, and they came and picked me up and took me to the hospital and gave me some morphine. I probably drunk texted you and Kyle for a little bit on that, but on some morphine. But went back to the doctor, and we did MRIs and everything. And what had happened was it was a disc herniation at in my L4 L5 vertebrae, which is everybody in the world has degenerative disc disease. Mm-hmm. And it's where the outside layer of your disc slowly erodes as you get older and older. And sometimes when it erodes, there can be a crack in it, and the inside jelly can fall out. Some people that's called a disc herniation. It's just like a hernia in your stomach where your guts spill out onto your past your muscles, right?
Right.
Well, that happened for me, and apparently disc herniations happen to people all the time, and depending upon where they're at, some people just don't even feel them at all. Some people will have really bad pain in their back, and some people don't feel them, even though they had a disc herniation. Mm-hmm. I got unlucky in that the stuff that fell out landed on my sciatica nerve, which is the biggest nerve in my body that runs through my leg.
Sure.
And so the doctor, like, we did some tests, and I had numbness all throughout my leg, like severe pain in my leg. I couldn't move my toes. And she said, we need to go in and get that off before it kills your nerve and you end up losing your leg. Yeah. But so that was this minor surgery I had. We talk about the surgery. It was literally an hour-long surgery, and I went back to work in the afternoon. I was drugged when I went back to work, but I still went back to work in the afternoon. It wasn't bad. So I'm slowly recovering from that. But the reason why I had the COVID test is because they give you these COVID tests before every procedure. That's why Claire got one as well. Yep. But did she get the brainstem swab, or did she get like? Yeah. Because there's one that's like they stick a metal tube up your nose and hit your brainstem and pull it back out. And then there's one that they get up in the sinuses, dude. They stuck something deep in there, but it wasn't the brainstem one.
That's what she had, the one that's in the side, like a normal flu test.
Yeah. So,
oh my God, in the brainstem,
dude. Yeah, that was like the first one that came out.
That seems unnecessary.
I know. You can look up look up early COVID tests, and you see these people go to it looks like one of those. I don't even know what it looks like a big hook that they just stick up in your nose and get back in there, but. I
mean, it seems like it
was bad when it first came out.
It sounds like they had just a hook in a drawer and just decided, hey, let's get this up there and see what happens.
Yeah. So, but right, exactly. But God dang it, they're getting better and better. So the tests aren't as bad now. Most places have. If you call them up and ask them for a test, they'll give it to you immediately. So you made contact with somebody, which we've all made freaking contact with somebody. One of my buddies came over and hung out, and it was the first time that I had hung out with anybody in person for legit since March. And while he was here, his wife texted me and my wife and says, hey, a guy that's on my team was just tested positive for coronavirus, as a heads up. And I was like, Lewis, go home, dude. Like, get out of my house right now. It's like, God, what horrible luck.
The next day the house goes up for sale.
Yeah.
That's it. We're moving. We can't beat this thing. We're out of here.
Right.
Yeah, man. Dude, it's a weird time. It's like, it's not comfortable for anybody. Like, nobody likes fucking wearing a mask on their face. Nobody does. Yeah. Except for the fact that I thought about this the other day when I was at Sam's. It's great that nobody recognizes me in public in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, some sunglasses on, man. It's great.
It's great for, like, you don't have your adoring fans coming up to you and asking you for autographs constantly now that you have your mask on, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's really that's not a thing. No, but it's just in general, like it's one of those things. I mean, this plays right into my hand of not having to interact with people. It's great, but like such a people person, But anyway, it's one of those things though that, like I said, nobody's comfortable doing this. Nobody wants to do it. It's not fun. It's not great, but it's not negotiable in this sense. Like, this is not a political issue. It's none of that. It's a science thing. And it's, and like, I love the people that are like, oh, well, how do you listen to the CDC? They change what they say every day. And it's like, well, that's how learning works. You learn things about it every day, and you make adjustments that you didn't necessarily know before.
Dude, amen to that. Like, the mark of a dynamic person is when you can be confronted with different evidence and change your opinion. And that's what the CDC has to do every day. Is this is a brand new disease. It's not like they looked at the thing and said, we know everything about this forever. You know, like new information, the virus mutates.
Right.
Every time that they come out with it, they're not trying. Listen, the CDC isn't trying to keep you in your house, bro. You work at a construction site. Like, no, like the government doesn't give a shit what you do. They're trying to keep a pandemic from killing everybody. Right. From killing a vast majority of people.
And my favorite too is like the whole like, oh, well, they're infringing on my rights to go outside. It's like, first of all, no one said you can't go outside. No one said that. Number two, like, it's the exact same reason as to why they put stoplights in place.
Yeah.
Like, should you stop at a red light? Definitely. Like, they put it in place to keep people safe. Like, do you have to? Not necessarily, but you're taking a huge risk by not doing so.
Right. Second, bro, you failed kindergarten. I'm pretty sure they don't give a shit about you, and they're not concerned about whether or not you in particular, but just these people that are doing. It's just like the vast majority of people have no reason to be concerned or about the government trying to keep them inside.
Right.
It's bizarre.
It's very
like, dude, you work at H&R Block. Like, they don't give a shit what you do.
Yeah. Well, it becomes this thing where, and again, we don't get into politics on this show. We're not going to do that by any means, but it becomes this thing where we've gotten into like, there's one side and then there's the other, and that's it. There is no middle ground. There's no room for discussion. It's either I'm right or you're wrong, and there's no other way around it. And there's no middle ground. And there's a lot of reasons behind that as to why we've gotten to that place in the last, 5 to 10 years. A lot of it involves social media and stuff like that. And, there's a lot of censorship involved and stuff going on there. But like, it's really interesting to see like this thing where it's like, we've gotten to this place where there is no discourse. There's no conversation. There's no, like humans as a general rule have to hear this, like, they have to hear these opinions and then these opinions and then these general facts that are kind of in the middle. And then you have to take those things and decide how you feel about things. And like, that's like, disagreement is going to happen. I love disagreeing with people. It's one of my favorite things to do because it really deepens your knowledge and your understanding of how things work. And, like we talk about this on this show, this specifically like in sports, like of how eye-opening it's been to do this show for the last 2.5 years together and hear how like you look at the game versus Kyle looks at the game versus how I look at the game. And you get a consortium of opinions where you can draw something that you just understand all sides of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's one of those things, like it doesn't have to be an I'm right, you're wrong thing. And like humans need to have discourse so that they can actually work out how they feel. They don't need to be, everything doesn't need to be editorialized and show. Like you don't always have to be told how you feel. That's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, I agree, dude. I agree 100%. I've been saying this for what it feels like a decade now. The major news companies are run by either a billionaire or multiple billionaires, and they have a vested interest in putting billions and billions of dollars into changing the way that you think and getting you to line up so that you fit in this one box.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right in that politics has become so polarized that there's no discourse anymore. Rather, what's happening is you choose between all of the different major news network. You choose which one you think that you align with more, and then over years you change all of your opinions to that one thing. And what happens is you have two groups of drones, and there's no dynamicism, if that's even a word, amongst people. Like you're so much more dynamic than just being completely left-leaning, or you're so much more dynamic than just being completely right-leaning. Go out and get your own opinions, get unbiased news sources that are just there to give you the information. Don't have to have editorials. Like make your own opinions. Yeah. And dude, it does seem like that, where we have one side of the political spectrum that seems to think that this is all a hoax, and then one side of the political spectrum that seems to take it a lot more seriously, but also gets really frustrated with the other side of the political spectrum and attacks them. Like, don't attack people.
Yeah.
Just tell them what you think. Like, help them understand. Yeah, exactly. If this thing is really real and you truly believe that, you don't do any good by attacking people and calling them stupid, even though I just did it a couple seconds ago. So that's my B. I don't even align. I don't even align with the political spectrum, dude.
Same.
But I'm on one spectrum, but it's not a political one.
Right.
But it doesn't help to call people idiots or get mad at them or defriend them on Facebook or or just block them on Facebook. give them more information and just hope that helps, because at the end of the day, if they're not wearing their mask, it's not affecting them as much as it is the people around them.
Right.
If I'm not wearing my mask, masks aren't there to protect me from stuff that's coming into my face. Masks are there to protect the spittle that's coming out of my mouth and any type of runny nose from going into other people.
Right.
Masks, if two people are unmasked, there's let's call it 100% transmission rate. It's obviously not 100% transmission rate, right?
Sure.
But let's call it that for the sake of our argument. One person puts on a mask, they have a 15% chance, less likely chance of receiving the virus from the other person. But the person that didn't put on the mask and the other person has the mask on has an 85% chance less than the person that has the mask on. Because the masks are there to keep you from spreading your own germs, not the other way around. So whenever you don't wear a mask, it's not about you taking risks and thinking that the virus isn't there. Right. You could be carrying that virus and be asymptomatic and be passing it to people. It's about how are you selfish enough to put on a mask for 15 minutes when you're outside, Yeah.
Well, and like it's really interesting too, because you kind of like you talked about the split decision on it. Like there's a one side that believes this and one side that believes that, and there's no common fact there. And that's what's interesting thing about it. And like where the social media companies come into play on this is a really interesting thing, because you look at something like Facebook, and like the Facebook was designed, the algorithms at Facebook were designed in a very specific way to curate content for you, to show you the things that you want to see more often. And as you interact with things, it says, okay, Josh likes basketball, let's show him more basketball things. And whenever you start to look at issues and you start to fight with people online and you start going back and forth and quote unquote showing that guy how it is, or whatever, you start to like it starts to show those algorithms that that's what you want more, and you're interacting more, and you're ultimately glued there to see it more. And that, like, whenever you're there longer, you see more ads, they make more money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's a very vested interest in companies like Facebook to keep their mouths shut during times where like things are trying to work work discourse out. And like that's where like the censorship and all that stuff gets into to play, and that's not worth going into on a basketball show because it doesn't really matter. But like
I don't even feel like we're a basketball show anymore, dude.
No, right? So, well, there's no basketball.
If you're ready to go, I'll go there with you.
Yeah,
but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think that's super interesting though, because that's something that that's a problem that nobody saw coming somehow. We all knew how this worked, but nobody saw that problem coming. And so now we get to this place where it's like, oh, well, we have to attack the other side, or, whatever side that is. We get to this point where we can't just turn on the news and just hear, okay, this is the facts. This is why this is important. Take it and do what you want with it. Debate it out yourself and decide how you feel about it. And then, go from there. It's you feel like this because this is how our side feels. And it's like, that's dangerous. That's not thinking for yourself. You had mentioned a bit ago, like you'd said that you had called people out for being stupid. It's not stupidity, really. It's ignorance. It's not, and people don't know this is happening to them. That's what scares me about it the most, is that people don't understand that like the natural human condition is to go home, like go to work every day, right? You come home and you're like, oh man, what a shit day. Well, let's get on Facebook. Oh God, fuck, we've got the border wall crisis. Oh, look at these fucking liberals, or look at these fucking let me tell this guy how it is, and it's like, that's not productive conversation. Like if we're all trying to sit here and trying to present views, that's a different story. But to sit there and just be like, oh, well, you're fucking stupid because you don't blah blah blah, like that. Like, first of all, human beings live for that shit. That's why reality TV is a very, very real thing that particularly in America, that people just eat the fuck up.
Right.
But like that kind of discourse, that's not discourse in what is meant to be human discourse, because human discourse is meant for you and me to sit down and have an actual conversation and debate things out to figure out and understand how the other one feels about it. But like whenever you can hide behind a profile where you don't necessarily have to have your name to it, that's where things change.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that Facebook isn't trying to feed you your opinion. Or excuse me, they're not trying to feed you the correct information. What they want to feed you is dopamine.
Right.
And creating an algorithm that shows you what you want to see and shows you stuff that agrees with you constantly is how they feed you dopamine, and they get you to stay on there longer, and then they shove more ads down your throat and get more revenue.
Right.
Like that's all Facebook is trying to do. And Facebook is just makes an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Anything you have, I've seen multiple people that delete apps because give them different opinions, and they're sick of reading that stuff. It's like, dude, I get that, and I get that you feel like you're being combated, but maybe sometimes the best thing for a person to be more dynamic and to understand a little bit more is take 15 minutes out of your day and read a book that you don't agree with.
Yes.
And just try to think about it, you know?
Absolutely. And that the times where I've done those things in my life personally have been the biggest growth experiences that I've ever gone through. And I'm better for them, because at the end of the day, at least if I sit down and I'm trying to argue my point, I can say, I respect where you come from on that. Here's why I think that doesn't add up. And I'm educated on understanding what those things are. And that's the point, is there's this, it doesn't have to get to this whole, like, some of my best friends do not agree with me politically or, socially and things like that. And we have incredible relationships because we're able to, we don't shy away from it. We've also got to this point where it's like, oh, well, I have an unpopular opinion, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Right. And it's like, that's a dangerous thing too, because then you've got people that just aren't putting that stuff out there. And we're dealing with some of the racial issues are a great example of that, of people that are well-meaning, some people, not all people by any means, but there are a lot of well-meaning people that, do a lot of things to, you look at people that are giving to these funds and things that are bailing people that are looting out. That's not a good, it's not a productive thing to be doing. Well, now giving to something like the ACLU that's going to help push those agendas forward and rights for African American people and really help people, that's a good thing, and that's a well-intentioned thing. But it's whenever you kind of start to contort that and start to contort actual your actual intent, that's where things get a little bit dicey here, and that is really interesting to me. It's an interesting topic, and I don't really know how we get away from that. I really don't. But it's scary.
It takes individual change. I saw a quote that today that was really good. It's I'm going to butcher it when I think of it, but it said, the onus is on you to be a better person in the society that you were raised in.
Absolutely.
Or even in the culture that you were raised in, or even, and I'll expand upon that and say that the household that you were raised in, it's your job to make yourself better. And dude, there's I think it's a Japanese proverb that I love that says, and I'm heavily paraphrasing here, but it is one that I think about a lot, where it's society is greatly benefited whenever people plant trees that they never expect to sit underneath the shade of.
Yeah.
And dude, for me, that's a lot of what I try to, dude. I've got a book on my desk right here that says how to give up plastic. Dude, all it does is cost me more money to give up plastic. All it does is cost me more of my convenience to give up plastic, but it's worth it to me because I'm trying to benefit the earth and trying to make the earth a better place. So if you're heavily left-leaning, go read Trump's autobiography. If you're heavily right-leaning, go read Malcolm X books. Dude, I promise you. And if all they do is make you mad, then scale it back a little bit. Maybe if you're heavily left-leaning, the next one you read is Dick Cheney's autobiography. And maybe if you're heavily right-leaning, the next thing that you read is White Fragility or something. Read something that just completely offends you, and then scale it back until you can start to understand, okay, this is something that I didn't quite agree with what this other guy was saying, but at least I know what he said, and I don't have to talk out of my ass when we're talking about him.
Right.
And I'm more in line with this, and just just have something that resets the bullshit that mass media feeds you every single day, regardless of what major news network you're watching. Dude, they're feeding you bullshit, and they're doing everything that they can to make you the exact same person as your neighbor and have the exact same opinion as your neighbor, because that's how they can control you.
Right. And you want to talk about how, we were talking about it just a bit ago, you want to talk about how to start to defeat things like systemic racism and whatnot. It's little steps, but it's the big thing is not being quiet and not just sitting back and letting these things happen. I think, we've seen a lot of these protests and things like that happening, and I couldn't be more glad for it, in a sense that it's about goddamn time, this. It's insane the way that Black people are treated in this country. It is absurd. It's sickening. It's I saw a video just before we came on the air, and it was just one of these videos where a bunch of white cops were attacking a Black dude, and it's just it literally almost brought me to tears. And
is that the one where that guy body slammed that guy?
Yeah, actually it was.
And the guy didn't even do anything.
He didn't do anything. And it's like that shit happens every single day. And I, while I haven't experienced that personally, excuse me, like I absolutely am, I come from a place of white privilege. I've never experienced anything like that, not in a million years. But so I can't relate to that. But what I can do is look at something like that and say, that is wrong. That's wrong. And, like, I think it's important to know that. Like, and like you said, like a lot of people will sit there and say, like, if you're just being complicit with racism, then that kind of makes you racist, which is pretty damn true. It's pretty damn true because that means you haven't decided how you feel about it. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it's the dude that's, and dude, here's what I will say. For me personally, and I didn't expect to go down this road, and I'm heavily drugged, heavily medicated right now, so this might not come out well, but we'll see. We'll see how it comes out.
Yep.
Whenever Kaepernick first started to kneel, it didn't make me mad, but I was like, that's a little disrespectful.
Sure.
And I was like I don't really care I don't really care. The NFL is going to lose revenue because of it, and I was always on this side of, he's employed by the NFL. If they want to kick him out, they can kick him out because they're losing revenue. Dude, I get it now. And what we're doing is we're looking back and going, and they're saying, protest it protest all you want, but don't riot. It's like, you weren't saying that when Kaepernick was protesting. You weren't saying protest however you want. You were saying protest wherever you want, but not there.
Right.
And then before that, when King was doing nothing but peaceful stuff and marching in the streets, he was still got assassinated.
We haven't come that far from it, and that's what's truly interesting. But you actually just illustrated your exact point. So you didn't know, like you didn't understand why Cap was kneeling like that, right? But you educated yourself to get a better understanding, so you understood. Oh, okay. This is where his intent is. Whether that, you can argue that all day long, but like his intent was nobody else listens to any other goddamn thing.
Right. So now what I have to do is, for me personally, like trying to be a dynamic person, is I have to think about Kyrie. And dude, I think that Kyrie is a flipping crackpot, bro. But here's where I'm coming from in this. He's came out early and said, I don't know if I want to play because of all the systemic racism. And my first inclination was, are you crazy, dude? You're making millions of dollars to play a sport, and the NBA has done nothing but support you. Why don't you want to come out and play? But then I just take a step back and figure out where they came from in me, because same thing I did with Kaepernick.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what I did with Kaepernick. Why would you not want to play? The NFL is paying you millions of dollars to play a sport, to live your dream. Even though you're a black person, you're so much more privileged than I am because you have these millions of dollars. So I don't know what to do with Kyrie right now. I don't know what to do. There are a lot of, because my first inclination is say, dude, he's crazy. He's a flat earther. He's always been weird. Like, I'm pushing all this to the side. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if in 5 years, if the riots stop and people settle down and nothing changes and something kicks back up, everybody looks at Kyrie and goes, we should have been listening to Kyrie. I don't know what to do with it, and I have to work that out in myself. But I just, there's a lot to bring it full circle. I have to, with anything that's happening in moral issues like this, I have to take my first reaction and try to find out where that's coming from.
Correct.
Regardless of whether it's a reaction where I agree with them or I disagree with them. It comes from a place of, dude, I've never felt like I missed out on something because of my race, or I've never felt like I've been treated a certain way because of my race. I've never had that. Yeah. I have to figure out whether or not my reaction is something is because I've never experienced that before.
Yeah.
Or if it's legitimate. Or if I agree with something because maybe I'm going too far the other way, and I just tend to it's not good to just say I agree with everything that you say because I don't want to be racist here.
Right.
You have to think through that, and you have to come up with what you believe is equitable. And dude, I've had a lot of conversations with my black buddies in that, like, try to break down my barriers and my preconceived notions and my what I've just grown up thinking my entire life, and trying to break that down and change the way that I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. To bring it all full circle, dude, I think it's the best thing that anybody can do for themselves is just challenge themselves and just read something that you don't agree with.
Yeah, and just be better. Like, I think the ultimate goal is just to be better. Like, just to do your part in some way. You don't have to necessarily go out and protest. You can go pick up garbage, for God's sakes. Like, your point is, and I think it's really important, is to just try to make the world a little bit better of a place. Like, we treat this planet and every other damn thing like shit all the time.
Dude, yes.
What we do, like, as a human, race, that's what we do. But I'll say that, those little things can make a big difference. And, it breaks my heart to see some of this stuff. But the fact that so much is on video now and everything is the best possible thing that it could happen, because people are seeing, people are seeing for themselves, like, hey, these people aren't making this stuff up. Like, these people are targeted. These people do not have a fair shake. And that's fucked up. And that's not how this society is supposed to work. And
dude,
it's like what we were saying. We haven't really come very far and all of this. And I agree with you. I really, really think that education is the biggest part of this, and understanding specifically how you feel. Why is racism unacceptable to you? And you're doing yourself a really good thing here, I think, personally, by spending the time to get to understand why you jump to X preconceived notion and Y preconceived notion, and what does that say about you as a human. Like, that's what we should all be doing, is taking a good look outside of ourselves and saying, why do we keep our fucking mouth shut when we see someone getting the shit kicked out of them?
Dude, yes. And like, honestly, it's freaking hard. I went for about a week whenever I first started, of like really delving into it and see what's going on, and then I just got exhausted and had like a week of apathy.
Yeah.
And just was like, I don't want to talk to anybody about her anymore. I don't want to watch the news. Anna was showing me a Netflix documentary that she wanted me to watch with her, and I was like, I don't want to watch that. Like, I'm tired, and I feel like a piece of garbage, But
yeah,
it's exhausting. Like, it's not the Facebook dopamine kick that you're going to get on, and where it's going to just shove everything that you agree with in your face, and you can read something and go, yeah, I agree with that 100%. Let me repost that, and then Facebook's algorithm goes, okay, that guy likes this. We'll feed him more of this.
Sure.
It's the opposite of that. Like, you're not kicking yourself with dopamine constantly. You're like chiseling the marble that is your body, and it hurts, and that is your mind, that it hurts.
And man, like, I'll tell you personally, like, I've had, and this, like, we've talked about this before, but like, my early 30s and everything have been full of introspection and some depression and some things like that, where I've really, really struggled to find myself as a person. But I really have felt that spending the time to do so is necessary. So I understand how I feel about things and why, because I look at it this way, like, we talked about at the top of the show, I have a newborn son. How am I supposed to encourage him to make this place a better world if I don't fucking know anything?
Dude, yes.
How am I supposed to tell him, I'm always going to let him make decisions of what, how he feels about things on his own, and arrive to them the right way. But I think I can help him in a better way growing up by helping him understand how to arrive at an actual opinion. Like, these opinions that we give up, even on this show, for example, are not just half-cocked things that we feel like talking about. Like, typically we're well-researched and we think through these things. Why shouldn't we be applying the same things to these racial issues and all that stuff? That doesn't make any sense to me. And it's something that I have personally felt that while we've had this time out from sports has been a very good use of my time.
Yeah,
I really have. So I agree with you. I think that's a really good way to look at it. We are probably the last two people that should be covering this topic.
Yeah.
But I also think that staying away from it is exactly the problem.
Yep.
So it's, we can't come from a place of perspective, but we can come from a place of the intent is doing better, and hoping that we can do something that helps the next 2 or 3 people see those views aren't acceptable anymore.
Right. And dude, my mom's full blood Latino. I look like a big white guy, dude. I'm a big 6'4" white guy. Every single one of my neighbors is white.
Yeah.
I live in a white neighborhood, and I will never understand the stuff that my black brothers and sisters go through. But dude, I have to try. Like, I have to try. Like, in the same way that I'll never understand what Anna goes through because she's a woman.
Right.
But I have to try.
Yes.
Because I want to have that discourse, and I want to have that relationship with her in the same way that I want to have a relationship with not exactly the same way, but like, I want to have a relationship with everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I want to be a good person. I want I've said it before. I want millions of people at my funeral because I want to have changed that many lives and made the world a better place for that many people. And dude, the start of that is looking inside myself and saying, how do I understand people more? How do I understand people more that don't look like me or that don't think like me?
Yeah. And how do you look at it in a sense of where you're not looking down on people? Because that's another thing too, is like, that's the part that kills me out, is you can't shame people into not being racist. That's not how it works. Like these are like, none of us are born racists necessarily. Like, I guess there are extenuating circumstances there, whatever.
No, I feel you. Yeah.
The general learned behavior. That's social behavior that's shown you for whatever reason that feeling like that is okay and acceptable. And it's just not. I don't know if you saw this video the other day, but I really, really took so much pleasure in it because it was in a barber shop. And this guy walked in. This guy was sitting in the barber chair getting his hair cut. This guy walked in and walked up to him and said, "Turn off that end music," and said it a couple of times or whatever. The guy finishes getting his hair cut and, stands up to the guy and is like, "What, man, you can't be saying that. Like, come on, like, what the fuck?" And, kind of confronts the guy. He's like, "You want to go outside?" And this guy just beats the living shit out of that guy.
Good.
And it was so gratifying. And it's like, that's not what I want either. Like, that's not what we're looking for. But like, just this. Well, I know I'm with you, but like,
I feel you.
We're not looking for a mob. They're not like, nobody's looking for a mob mentality type situation here. This isn't like the people of Springfield, for God's sakes.
Right.
What we are looking for is someone that's going to say, "Hey, that's a fucking enough. That's enough," and that matters. All those things matter, and everyone that's going to step up to do that matters, and including myself.
Yeah, dude. Being racist has to be absolutely outcast. Being racist should put you on an island by yourself where you're isolated, and it doesn't in this day and age.
It doesn't. It's sad.
Yeah.
We're just not there yet. And but we can try to be better. That's all we can really do, and we can try to understand, and I think, you'd said it too, like, I think it's important to really try to understand what that would feel like and try to find empathy there. Mm-hmm. Try to find true empathy for people, because, man, like, it's funny, we joke about this all the time, like, people generally suck, like humans in general suck, like everybody is really just generally terrible, but I do find this world incredibly comical because everybody's just trying to be a little bit better than the next guy, but what it really is just maybe slightly less worse. It's not really better. It's just, like, my neighbor has an 8-foot pool, so I'm gonna have a 10-foot pool. Right. Like, it's that kind of thing. But like, this world is generally comical in that way because that is how humans interact. But like, this whole thing where it's like not having true empathy and like being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, that's the part that I have no patience for. Is you're not even spending the time to try to understand what someone else went through for you not to act like a jackass.
Right.
It's pretty easy. Just don't be a fucking asshole. But also don't let things just go, because that's not right either. Right. So we all have a part in it, man. It's a crazy time. It's a crazy thing to be diving into. I'm glad that we were able to get into it a little bit. I think we're going to talk a lot more about it with Kyle and some guests and whatnot that we have coming up here in the future. Now that we're kind of back on the road of having the show, we may not have basketball for a little while. So you know what? This is a perfect opportunity to be talking about this stuff.
Dude, I didn't even know we were going to get down this road. I thought we were gonna just talk basketball this whole time, and you trapped me.
What the hell?
I blame you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but this is the point, though. Like,
that was good. This is something that needs to happen.
Like, we did not want to be off. Like, it really sucked that the timing came, but we're not afraid of talking about this stuff, and we're going to keep talking about it, because that's the other thing, is that this can't just go. You had mentioned, like, oh, we don't want it to just go away, and then 5 years be like, oh, well, everybody should listen to Kyrie. Like, this has to stay front and center for anything to actually change.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying don't hear me say Kyrie's right. That was all about.
No, not at all.
What I do with when somebody acts differently than the way that I expect them to act.
Yes. And to Kyrie's point, I mean, he got killed for all that shit too. And like, he was really just trying to illustrate the other side of it, and a really important side. And I mean, man, I will never stand up for Kyrie in most situations, but like, he did kind of unnecessarily get killed there. And he was really just trying to raise a good point or a good question that nobody else seemed to want to ask.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
That's admirable in and of itself. It's not very like him, but it's very admirable in and of itself.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
All right, man. It's been an hour. Let's get the hell out of here and stop wasting everybody's time. It's not a waste of time by any stretch.
This is the least waste of time episode that we've had ever, maybe. But
Never.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I appreciate you having me back.
Dude, I mean, it's your show too. So, I mean, I appreciate you having me back, and hopefully Kyle will find a way to plug in his computer and be back with us next week.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's get out of here. Later, man.